Well, great. I'm really glad to be here today. Thank you so much, LSU folks for inviting us. I'm Galen Scott from National Geodetic Survey. I am the Constituent Resources Manager, which means I'm the person that is charged with working with our constituents to try and solicit your feedback on the products and services and tools that NGS is developing, for the modernized National Spatial Reference System. So I'm really pleased to be here today to talk to you about GPS on benchmarks. I want to start off by acknowledging my co-authors here, Dr. Kevin Algren. He's our geodesist and GEOID modeler on the GPS on benchmarks team. And Dennis Reardon is our Gulf Coast Regional Geodetic Advisor. He'll be talking to you a little bit later today about data collection methods. And then another person I didn't put on the slide, but is also one of our team members here, is Brian Shaw, who is our GIS guru and now happens to be the Rocky Mountain Regional Geodetic Advisor. So this is a talk, I think this fits pretty well with what Tony went over. Tony, thanks really for setting the stage for me in this talk here. I'm going to go over some of the some similar things and probably talk about it in a slightly different way here. I'm going to give you a brief history of where we're coming from. I'm going to again talk to you more about different types of GEOID models, the hybrid GEOID models and the gravimetric GEOID model. That'll be the foundation for the future. I'm going to talk about the multiple benefits of participating in GPS on benchmarks. We're going to review the data that NGS has and what's still needed, and I'm going to do a live demo of some of the tools that we have for the GPS on benchmarks program. And then I'm going to encourage you all to discuss opportunities to collect, to improve data collection coordination, because we're really, the new paradigm is collecting GPS data and submitting it to NGS so that we can use it in the tools and models that we're building. And we should have time for questions and answers at the end. So a little history here. This. National Geodetic Survey is part of the nation's first civilian science agency, the Survey of the Coast, which was established in 1807 by Thomas Jefferson after Lewis and Clark came back, and they discussed the importance of accurate maps to support commerce. What started off as a mission to survey the U.S. coastline and create nautical charts for safe navigation and help increase maritime safety, it expanded as the nation grew westward and surveys of the U.S. interior began. So in 1878, the agency was given the new name of the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey, which it maintained until 1970. And at that point, the National Geodetic Survey became part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So for much of our history, NGS and our predecessor agencies have collaborated with public and private organizations to establish reference stations at precisely determined locations. As you all are quite aware, right? Traditionally, precise positioning locations were identified by setting a survey mark, right? A permanent mark in the ground. Usually brass or bronze or aluminum discs. And these locations might also be identified by a deeply driven rod or a prominent object like a water tower or a church spire. Over the years, NGS has collected and stored survey data on over 1 million of these survey marks around the country. And then in the 1980s, NGS really helped to usher in the modern era of positioning by finding new civilian uses for the GPS system, right? The Global Positioning System, which the Department of Defense designed to allow them to put a missile through a window anywhere in the world, right? First by using multiple GPS receivers and putting them on known locations, those survey marks. NGS helped to unlock GPS as a surveying tool for the civilian market. Since then, NGS has fostered a series of continuously operating GPS reference stations. These are the cores, as you know. And each of these cores includes a high accuracy receiver that continuously collects the GPS radio signals that are broadcast by the satellites. And in addition, over the past decade, many other countries have launched their own satellite systems, right? And these are collectively known as GNSS, or Global Navigation Satellite System satellites. And these include the US's GPS system, China's Compass system, Russia's GLONASS, and the European Galileo system. Currently NGS relies on the GPS signals only, but we are currently building new software that will allow us to take advantage of these other additional systems, which is really going to unleash a lot more power. GPS and the other GNSS systems, as Tony mentioned, and as you all probably know, they provide what we call ellipsoid heights, right? Heights relative to a specific mathematical model of the Earth, which is smooth and of course ellipsoidal. And as strange as it sounds by themselves, these ellipsoid heights won't tell you necessarily which way water will flow, which is really important for lots of questions and applications. Think sewer pipes and flood maps. For understanding which way water will flow and measuring heights that will tell you which way water will flow, you also need to account for gravity. So by the 1990s, NGS started to develop GEOID models, or models of gravity for surveyors to use with the ellipsoid heights from GPS. And as we began to add GPS into the surveyor's toolbox and use it with the existing datums of NAVD83 and NAVD88, NGS used GPS data on those existing survey control marks to create what are called hybrid GEOID models, right? So starting with GEOID 96, NGS has produced a series of 9 hybrid GEOID models over the past 23 years, and each one of them incorporating the newest data and the latest advances in modeling. So GEOID 18, which I was the project manager for, and Dr. Kevin Algren, as I mentioned before, was the wizard behind the curtain making GEOID 18. So GEOID 18 is currently the official hybrid GEOID model for determining GPS-derived NAVD88 orthometric heights. Now, as we look into the future for the modernized National Spatial Reference System, which we're working on now, NGS is going to provide a purely gravimetric GEOID model, unencumbered by warping that nice gravity model to the network of survey marks and giving NAVD88 heights. We're going to be transitioning to the new datum, so the gravimetric GEOID 2022 will provide the foundation for the promised 2-centimeter GNSS heights in the modernized system. So going all the way back to Thomas Jefferson and looking into the future, we're really being able to harness this technology to give us heights at accuracies and in places we haven't been able to get that before. So let me see if I can advance this slide. Oh, there we go. Yes. So speaking of NAVD88, as you all know, it's based on a continental scale geodetic leveling, right? I love this slide, and I see the NAVD88 project manager is out there, Dave Zulkowski. Hi, Dave. Glad to have you on the line. Dave had the honor of hiring me about 18 years ago. So glad to hear you again, Dave. NAVD88 consists of about 800,000 benchmarks connected by about 2.2 million kilometers of leveling, right? I love this idea of these people, these surveyors that literally walked across the country, east to west, north to south, moving their families with them over time, surveying in the north during the summer and moving to the south during the winters. Just the long history of lots of really high accuracy work. The issue with NAVD88, among other things, though, is that it's made of that 2.2 million kilometers of leveling, but that data was collected over about 80 years. And it was the best available data at the time, but it was all matched together. And as we know, particularly down there in Louisiana, the Earth's a dynamic place, right? Things don't stay in the same place. So putting all of that data together that was taken in different time frames definitely introduced some errors into the system, right? So NAVD88 suffers from a known bias of about 50 centimeters and a tilt across the continental U.S. Of about a meter relative to the gravimetric geoid, just the gravity model. So you're probably all familiar with this, but I just want to illustrate here how this really affected NAVD88, right? So if we consider here, we have a house with a benchmark. NAVD88 suffers from unknown movements, right? We're not really sure how things are moving in different places from one place to the other. So for an example here, a level line was performed to that benchmark in 1954, right? Between 1954 and 1991, when we released NAVD88, this area sank. It's in an area of subsidence. So in 1991, the original 1954 leveling data was used to compute those NAVD88 heights, and those were published for that benchmark. So that was the published NAVD88 height was from where that benchmark was back in 1954 when it was leveled. However, the true height was much different than that. How much different? Well, we're not sure unless we can remeasure or get an idea of those rates of subsidence. So the true height of relative to NAVD88 zero surface is not necessarily the published NAVD88 height because things may have moved in between the time it was leveled and the time it was adjusted. So that was the best technology we had at the time, and it served us very, very well. We've now been able to build, as I mentioned, those GEOID models that allow us to use the capability of GPS. And there's a lot of really important survey information that we have collected on those benchmarks that currently serve as the foundation for NAVD88. So GPS on benchmarks is about collecting the data on existing NGS marks that have NAVD88 published orthometric heights so that we can build this bridge between the old system and the new system and to create a transformation tool that will allow you to transform between the old system and the new system. In addition, GPS on benchmarks is really about allowing you and allowing people in the geospatial community to prepare our country and our communities to take full advantage of the benefits of the modernized NSRS. So GEOID 18 is the current hybrid GEOID model that will give you GPS-derived NAVD88 heights. A few of the benefits, right? If you collect GPS data on those level benchmarks and you submit them to NGS, we will use that data to improve the local results of the transformation tool that we're going to build to allow you to transform between NAVD88 and NAPGD 2022. In addition, you're also going to get coordinates in the modernized system. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those shortly here, but 2020.0 reference epoch coordinates will be released with the modernized system, computed from the data that we get. So if you can go out there, collect data on those marks that you use, send that to us, we will adjust that into the reference epoch coordinate adjustment and give you 2020.0 reference epoch coordinates when the modernized system is released. The other important thing here is that by collecting GPS data on these marks consistently over time and sending that data, submitting that data to NGS, we're helping to provide you with the opportunity to track changes over time using what we're calling survey epoch coordinates. I'm going to go a little bit more into that here shortly. But here's just another couple of examples of what Tony was showing you a little bit earlier here about the relationship between geoids and heights, right? We've got our topography, the surface of the land. We've got a geoid, and we've got the chosen ellipsoid, right? So the ellipsoid height is what we measure with GPS. The geoid height actually comes from the orthometric height comes from leveling, and that's really this big H here between the geoid and the topography. And then the geoid model gives you the difference between the chosen ellipsoid and the geoid. So together, these three types of measurements, the gravity, the geoid model, the GPS ellipsoid height, and the leveled orthometric height, they fit together in this simple equation, which makes evaluating different data sets relatively straightforward. If we have leveled data, we have ellipsoid height data, we can then use that information in this equation to evaluate different geoids and to create a hybrid geoid. So again, the two types of geoid models, the gravimetric geoid model combines terrestrial, airborne, and satellite-based gravity measurements with digital elevation models and math and physics. And GEOID 2022 will define NAPGD 2022 in the modernized NSRS. So the modernized NSRS will be based on a purely gravimetric geoid model. The current prototype for that is the XGeoid 20. For the past 6 or 7 years, each year we've been building and releasing these experimental geoid models that are the prototypes for the gravimetric model of the future modernized system. Over the past 20 plus years, NGS has created hybrid geoid models to convert those NAD83 ellipsoid heights from GPS observations to NAVD88 orthometric heights, right? You know, for the past 20 years, we've been using ellipsoid or geoid models and GPS data to give you NAVD88 orthometric heights, right? That series of models was released between 96 and 2019. We cover all the US states and territories, and to make those hybrid geoid models, we use the GPS on benchmark data to constrain those geoid models to the NAVD88 heights. And again, that current model is GEOID 18. And we created GEOID 18 by comparing, the data that we had across the whole country. So specifically here, the hybrid GEOID 18 and NAVD88 heights, right? We have the benchmarks. These are benchmarks, leveled benchmarks with published NAVD88 heights on the topography. We then used the purely gravimetric geoid model, XGeoid 19. That's the one that we used to create the hybrid model GEOID 18. And then we had the chosen ellipsoid. And so what we did is we collected, we collected GPS data on those benchmarks on the topography, and then Kevin Algren warped that geoid surface to those benchmarks so that when you have GPS data and you apply that geoid model, it gives you the NAVD88 height. Okay, so again, the GPS on benchmark data has been used to take that gravimetric geoid model and warp it into a hybrid geoid model that gives you NAVD88 heights, right? And again, the equation works the same, and that's the idea here of hybrid geoid models, that we create those hybrid geoid models using that GPS on benchmark data. So in the future, the issue here, though, is that sometimes this equation didn't close, right? Because for a number of reasons, particularly as I mentioned before, the time difference and the differential movement that happened between the time that the leveling data was collected and the time that the GPS data was collected, right? We're assuming that those were contemporaneous, but in reality they weren't. So it built in some error into this system, and that equation didn't always close. However, for GEOID 2022, it will define NAPGD 2022 heights. Right? So this equation will close every time because it is the definition of NAPGD 2022. So you're going to have, you're going to get your ellipsoid heights, you're going to apply the GEOID 2022 model, and you're going to get your NAPGD 2022 orthometric heights. So we've learned from the past that GPS is a really, really good tool, and we're designing the whole new system with a gravimetric geoid to be able to give you 2-centimeter heights pretty much anywhere. So I mentioned a 2-track approach to new coordinates in the modernized system, right? one of the big benefits of this modernized National Spatial Reference System is time-dependent positioning, that it can account for the fact that the Earth's a dynamic place and things are moving. And sometimes you want to be able to see that motion in the surveys that you're doing, and other times you don't, right? So the reference epoch coordinates are the coordinates that will be estimated by NGS from time-dependent, age-limited historic survey data, along with CORS coordinate functions and an intra-frame velocity model at an official NSRS reference epoch. The idea here is that this is an estimated snapshot of the entire network, and we're going to redo this every 5 or 10 years. So you're going to get 2020.0 RECs when we release the new system. This is a nod to the idea that we want to keep things consistent, and it's really a nod to how we work today, right? Today, we all work in NAVD88 at 2011, epoch 2010. So the reference epoch coordinates will be very similar to that, and they won't change through time. However, people also want to know how those marks are moving, because particularly down there in Louisiana, things are moving at different rates in different places, and we don't necessarily know how they're changing. You're going to hear more about that later when we hear the presentation on synthetic aperture radar that can help to understand how things are moving differently. But survey epoch coordinates are coordinates that are computed by NGS using the data and the metadata that you submit to us, and they're adjusted to distinct epochs through time. The survey epoch coordinates will answer the question, what were the mark's coordinates when it was last surveyed, right? What we're gonna do is we're gonna adjust multiple surveys within time spans that we call adjustment windows. Those adjustment windows for GPS projects are probably gonna be about 4 weeks. So we're going to take a month's worth of data, GPS data that's submitted to NGS from all over the country. We're going to adjust it all together, and we're going to give you a coordinate at the midpoint of that adjustment window. And so if you collect data through time, every month or every few months, you can have multiple survey epoch coordinates that will show you the change over time, how that mark is moving. So you'll have that choice in the new system to use a consistent reference epoch coordinate or the survey epoch coordinates that do incorporate the motion. So GPS on benchmarks has resonated a lot with people across the country, and it's really driven a surge in shared Opus solutions. So this is a graph of the number of Opus shared solutions that we've gotten per month since 2007, and you can see from between 2007 and all the way to 2018, they were relatively small, upwards of 250 shared solutions per month. But starting in 2018, we launched the campaign to collect data to improve the hybrid GEOID model, to collect data that would go into GEOID 18. And man, folks around the country really responded very well, right? You can see this line here. We broke, record after record every month that year in 2018 with, in terms of new data that was being given to us, being submitted to us. We took that data and we used it. We constrained the gravimetric model to that data to be able to give you an improved hybrid GEOID model, GEOID 18. After GEOID 18, we recognized that the next target was collecting that data to create the transformation tool that's going to transform between the old datums and the new datums. So it took us a little while in 2019 to actually make GEOID 18 and get it released. So back in about July of 2019, we relaunched the GPS on Benchmarks campaign for the transformation tool. And you could see we slowly got some momentum there through the end of 2019, and then 2020, things started to pick up. We were on pace pretty much with 2018 for the GEOID campaign, but momentum has been really building. And you can see that this year, you know, things are going really strong. We're getting data from all over the country. You know, back in March, we issued a challenge to the community to see if you all could beat the record that was set back in August of 2018 for data submissions, and we did it. You did it, collecting and submitting that data to us. So, you know, this is, you know, the modernized, you know, the importance of this is that the modernized NSRS will be realized through shared GNSS data. So it's really important for you to start really thinking about collecting that data and submitting it to NGS, because we can use that to build products and tools that you'll need to use to do your jobs in the future. So I guess Tony showed this earlier, but I'm going to be a little more clear here about this. You know, the relationships between the old datums and the new datums vary by location. And the accuracy of the transformation tool in any particular area is directly related to the density of the GPS on benchmark data that we have in that area to, you know, define that relationship between those two systems, right? So when we make the jump from moving from NAVD88 to NAPGD 2022, there's going to be a shift, and that shift is going to be a one-time jump in the 0 to 2 meter range in orthometric heights, right? And that's what this colored map shows, is that shift between NAVD88 and the gravimetric GEOID model. GPS on benchmark data is used to measure that shift. You can see it's relatively consistent going, you know, in this direction here, but those colors are slightly different within contained geographic areas. So in order to really define the relationship between these two systems, we need data in all those places to nail it down, right? So GPS on benchmark data is used to measure this. It will be used to measure the shift between the old datum and the new datum, right? You all may have seen this slide before, the shift and the drift, right? I just talked about the shift, you know, and GPS on benchmark data being used to measure that shift. The drift then comes in because coordinates are now time dependent in the new system. The shift will take you to 2020.0. But working in any other epoch means that you need to account for that velocity in your coordinates. And we're going to provide those velocities through what's called the intra-frame velocity model. The name might change in the future, but this, you know, is a representative, a model of how the surface moves through time. And you'll hear more about that in the next presentation, hopefully on INSAR. So, you know, that drift, we need that intra-frame velocity model to compute that drift to move the coordinates through time. Now, we're using right now, this is a prototype of that intra-frame velocity model. We're using a prototype called Trans4D, and we're using that. It's kind of a scoping tool now to evaluate how things are changing, how fast are things changing in different places. And of course, you all know you're in the deep red down here, along with Houston, Galveston area. The idea here is that, you know, we really recommend for people in areas of vertical motion of 2 millimeters or more, you really should be collecting and submitting data to NGS to help develop that time series of observations so we can help you track the movement and the changes in those marks over time. So again, Tony mentioned the blueprints, the blueprint documents. In particular, Blueprint 3 is called Working in the Modernized NSRS. The other two give you lots of technical details about how things are going to be built and such, but this one talks about how people will work in the modernized system, the workflows that will, you know, that will need to be in place. This was originally released in 2019, but we just redid it in 2020, and this time we included 4 what we call use cases. And this was released back in March, and we have 2 great webinars that are available on our website if you want to go check those out if you didn't see them. March 11th, Dr. Drew Smith talked about Blueprint 3 and all the new decisions and things that we put in there. And then on April 8th, Nick Kinsman led another webinar talking about these use cases. So I encourage you all to get out there, check this out, and check it out. In particular, I'm going to talk about this this one here, this transitioning data to the modernized system, right? Participating in the writing of this Blueprint 3 document really made me and the team reevaluate GPS on benchmarks and the role that GPS on benchmarks plays in this transition to the new system, right? Back in 2019, we had launched the GPS on benchmarks for the transformation tool campaign, right? To gather data to use to create the transformation tool. But then when we wrote this, use case about how you're going to transition data to the modernized system, we came up with this, this order. The best way, these are listed in decreasing levels of accuracy and really decreasing levels of cost. But the best way to get your marks and your projects into the new system will be to get out there and collect new observations and get reference epoch coordinates, right? The second best way is to get, is to readjust your existing projects using, marks and data from that have published reference epoch coordinates. So resurvey or readjust. The third best way is to transform. Lots of people are going to be transforming, but it's not, it's not the most accurate way to get into the new system. There's a lot of people that will need to use, the transformation tools. But what we recognized is that participating in GPS on benchmarks is actually getting out there and resurveying, right? So when you are participating in GPS on benchmarks, you're not just contributing data to the transformation tool, but you're getting out there, resurveying these marks, and we will then give you reference epoch coordinates. So, writing this use case here really kind of helped put things into a different perspective for us. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to see if there's any questions, and I'm going to hop out of this and do a live demo of the tools. Are there any questions out there that I can answer? Not hearing any. Okay. I'm not seeing the question and answer panel either. So let's see. All right. So we have released several tools to help you understand where we need data and to make it more efficient so that people can collaborate to collect the data that's needed. This is the GPS on benchmarks for the transformation tool web map application. And Dennis Reardon is going to show you a little bit more later about how to get here and some other things, and I'll show you the link in a bit. But this is the map that shows you the marks that we've identified that we think getting new data on would be most beneficial. So here, if you click, we update this map about every week. If you click this About button here, it'll tell you it was last updated yesterday. So once a week, we take all the new data that we get from GPS submissions to mark recovery submissions, and we update this map. Again, the idea is that we want to have coverage every 10 kilometers across the country in order to create this transformation tool. So we have created, come on now, there we go. So we have created this map that shows you the marks that we need and these 10-kilometer hexagons representing the area on the ground that will be affected by that new data, right? That area will be, with new data, the transformation tool will be better in that hexagon there. So I'm going to go through the marks here. As you know, for surveying, good surveying practice, we need redundant observations, right? We need at least 2 observations that match within a couple of centimeters. So what we do is we tell you on this map if it, whether we need 1 or 2 observations on the mark. Any mark that has a red dot in the center, you can see here, we already have 1 observation. We just need 1 more. Any of these dots that have a yellow center means we need 2 matching observations. Okay. We've also broken them out into priority A and priority B marks, and that's really just based on metadata that we have. The reality is that we will use whatever data that that you can get to us, and we just wanted some way to prioritize it. So if you limited resources, go for the A marks first, but the B mark data on the B marks will also be very helpful. So what's important to know here is that these marks that we are listing in this GPS on benchmarks map, they're automatically selected based on the metadata that we have, right? So if I click on this one here, it's going to tell me that it's priority A. We need 2 observations, and it's going to show you. You can get the data sheet from there, right? You can get the data sheet if you want. If you click into that hexagon, though, it'll show you that that's the primary PID that we've automatically selected based on metadata, is this one here, represented by that mark. However, any of these other marks, if new data on any of those other marks, will also help and will also, complete that hexagon. So let's say a couple of things. Let's say first thing is that mark's no longer there. It got knocked out in new road construction. Well, you then go down to find one of these marks to collect data on it. If you're doing your recon and want to go and find marks in a particular hexagon, you click on that hexagon and you click this more info button, and it's going to give you all of the data sheets for all of the marks that are shown in that hexagon, right? So not just that primary mark, but it's going to give you the other marks as well. So you can go out there, do your recon, and find a mark that works. The important thing here is that these are automatically selected based on the metadata. What we need is marks with published NAVD88 heights, right? That's what we need to be able to create the transformation tool. However, if you have a mark that you use that's not in our list, but it does have a published NAVD88 height, then by all means, observe that mark. We can use that data as well. So that's why I made it clear that we're selecting these marks by the metadata that we have, but you all are the ones out in the field using these marks. So go ahead and observe marks that you need. And if it has a published NAVD88 height, then we'll be able to use that data for the transformation tool. But even if it doesn't, we'll take that data that you submit to us, and when we do the reference epoch coordinate adjustment, we'll give you the new reference epoch coordinates on that mark that you use when you submit it. So this is a way to not only do the transformation tool, but to prepare your community in the places that you work by collecting the data now, so that you'll get the reference epoch coordinates when the new system's released. Let's see. So there's a lot of other good information here. You can do filtering by state. You can do filtering by county. You can look at the attributes of the marks down here. You can export them. There's a lot of great things that you can do with this map to try and understand where we need data, and help us help you with new tools. So that's the GPS and benchmarks web map. Are there any questions about that before I move along? Nope. Okay. So as I mentioned, we've set an ambitious goal of 10-kilometer spacing across the whole country. And what we have here is the progress dashboard for the GPS on benchmarks for transformation tool campaign. Again, we're looking for 10-kilometer spacing for the country as a whole. You can see here where that data is. Just like the future, it's not evenly distributed yet across the country. Some places like Minnesota, they've been collecting this data for a long time, and they're way ahead of pretty much everybody. But the idea here is that we're tracking the data that's coming in towards our goals. And what I really like here is to see, down here, this is those 10-kilometer hexagons completed. You can see over the the amount of data that was collected. Here's the 2018 GEOID 18 campaign, and then here is the sustained data collection campaign for the transformation tool. You can see it's just been building pretty consistently since the middle of 2019. You can see also that, you know, here we're in June of 21, and we are getting close to beating the 2018 high. Last year, of course, was the biggest year of all for this data. But one of the cool things you can do here is we go down here to Louisiana. I'll click on that, and it will update the map. It'll update the map to show the progress in Louisiana, right? So we had a total, there's a total of 447 hexagons in Louisiana. You know, hexagons where we have published NAVD88 marks. So far, y'all have collected data on 256 of them. So you're over 57% complete for the state, which is great. You know, y'all, this is going really well here. And you can see here that, you know, through time, you folks there were really engaged back in that was 2016. That's the 2016 GPS survey. And then, you know, the amount of data collected over the past couple of years, and by months here. So what's really cool here is you can, you know, check not only how you're doing, but you can check against your neighbors. Let's see. So if I click Mississippi, Mississippi's at 17%. Alabama. Alabama's at 9%. So you guys are doing really well. And you know, one of the things I like to do is try and instill a little competition, get people moving on this, because this is one of those things where the more data that we can get, the better we can really serve you and your needs. Moving along to the Opus Shared Solutions dashboard. This is another dashboard that's not focused on the GPS on benchmarks campaign, but just gives you data for all Opus shared solutions. And this goes all the way back to 2007. And you can see, you can actually switch between down here. These are the dates that the data was loaded, but you can also switch over here to see, you know, by the dates that things were observed, right? So you can see, you know, that Opus Share chugged along for years and years until we really started pushing this GPS on benchmarks thing, and then we started to see major bumps up in the numbers of solutions. But what I really like about this tool is that it comes, you know, over here. You can see who's contributing, right? Nationwide, if we look at it, state agencies are, you know, particularly state departments of transportation, and those with geodetic surveys are by far the biggest contributors across the whole country. Private sector is right up there as well, and the federal government, NOAA and Army Corps and others are down here. Academic institutions and local, state and local governments are also participating. But if we go in and we look at Louisiana, and I think yep, there we go. It tells an interesting story here. So we look at Louisiana, we can see the Opus shared solutions that have come in from Louisiana. And you know, first of all, what jumped out at me here is that the private sector is far ahead of everybody else in terms of collecting and submitting Opus, you know, collecting GPS data and submitting it to Opus. Federal government and academic community, I guess LSU primarily, are the other contributors here. And the state DOT is not a big user of Opus Share yet. The other thing to look at here, which is really interesting, which is very different than many other states, is that we can look at by mark type, right? The vast majority of marks that have been observed by and you know, have shared Opus solutions are not NGS marks in Louisiana. So if I just look at the NGS marks, right, because for the, you know, we need to have the leveling data on those marks to be able to use with that GPS data to to make the tools and models that we're building. So what I'm really interested here is observations on NGS marks in particular. So if I go back here to the agency type, now it's academic community that is far and away leading with the submission of data on NGS marks, followed by the private sector and the federal government. What I really like about this, and again, kind of stoking a little bit of competition here, you can then zoom in here to this, and let me see if I can make this larger. There we go. There it is, LSU, Center for Geoinformatics, the #1 contributor of GPS data on NGS marks in Louisiana, followed by NGS and some private sector firms. And then Army Corps here. So, this is just a tool to keep track of who's submitting what data and where. And I think it's really interesting to see, the partnerships and the collaborations that happen, who's participating in this and who's not, because, the future of the modernized National Spatial Reference System is about using GPS and submitting that data to NGS so that we can continue to update our models and tools. The last thing I'm going to show you here is our mark recovery webpage. We've got this slick new mark recovery webpage, which I really like because it allows you to submit data when you find a mark and let us know whether it's still there. So here's your mark recovery form, and it's got a cool new button called Find Marks Near Me, which I'm not allowed to use because my federal government computer will not give my position away. But it will pull up a map here, and I can draw a new center, and then it will tell me the marks that are around there. And then I can click on one of those marks, and it will populate this recovery form. So the idea here is, that you can collect, go out there, find these marks, and then report back to us whether you found it, whether it's GPSable. You can give us new pictures and such. We also have a cool mark recovery dashboard that I won't go too far into here, but you can see if you do submit a mark recovery, you can then check our mark recovery dashboard to make sure that that we got it. And I'm going to show you in a minute here. We do have a bit of a backlog of getting these mark recoveries onto the data sheets themselves, but we're doing pretty well with getting them to update the GPS on Benchmarks web map. So if you do, if you go out there, you try to find a mark that's on our list and it's gone and it's been destroyed, you can submit that mark recovery to us, tell us it's gone. Within a week or two, we'll be able to take that off our list and suggest a different one for people to use. So I'm going to go back to my presentation. Let's see. Yep. Okay, there's the mark recovery dashboard. And again, please, if you submit a mark recovery note for marks that you find up to once a year, let us know, did you find it? Is it GPSable? Do you have new photos? Not only does that help us update our maps, but it also helps other people know what marks are out there and usable. We're getting to the end of my talk here. All of this data is out there on the web in ArcGIS format on ArcGIS Online, and people can grab it and make their own tools. So here's the one from Florida, where they have the Florida GPS on Benchmarks web map, and they can provide all kinds of other additional information for people that are using that. What I really like about it is that it allows people to propose observations and let other people know that somebody plans to go out and collect data on a particular mark, so that they can coordinate efforts, so that you don't have different people collecting data on the same mark when they could be getting data on other marks. Here's the example from Alabama. Alabama just put their GPS on Benchmarks web map together, and they're combining that with some of their DOT priorities of collecting marks on some of the harms there. So this is just another example of a way that that you all could help to coordinate, amongst yourselves within Louisiana to make it easier to get the data for your state. So if you've got your own map or a story map or a dashboard, or have a great picture or a story about GPS on benchmarks, please drop us a line. This is one of my regular jobs, and we really like to hear from people that are participating. Last two slides, the timeline for getting data to us. We have a small team that's pretty efficient, but there are some things that take longer than others. If you submit a mark recovery to us, we're going to update that GPS on benchmark priority map within about a week. But getting that information onto the NGS data sheet is taking sometimes up to three months or more now, just because we're in a backlog. With the people that we have. Getting data, submitting data through Opus and sharing that data through Opus. Once you confirm that you want to share, meaning that when you share an Opus solution, you'll send in the data, somebody at NGS will look at it, and then they're going to let you know if they approve it, and if they do, you need to respond and confirm that you do want that data to be shared. Once it's shared, it takes about a day after that to get that Opus shared solution to us, and then it'll go into our web map update in about 1 to 2 weeks, and it really depends on what day of the week it gets submitted, because we do those updates. Kevin Algren does the updates to the map starting on Fridays, because it takes over the weekend to do. If you're going to be blue booking data through NGS through Opus projects, those results will get published on NGS data sheets. The time it takes depends on the size and the complexity of the survey, anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks once it's complete. Sometimes, depending on the survey, it takes a little longer to actually to do the blue booking part of it, but from our side, it's about 2 to 4 weeks. And then once it gets blue booked and the data sheets are updated, we'll be able to update the GPS on benchmark priority maps in about 1 to 2 weeks. So there is a bit of a delay. If you submit data and you don't see it appear where you think it should be, outside of these timeframes, please drop us a line and we'll definitely look into it. My last slide here, we're all traversing the path towards NSRS modernization. The cutoff date to get us data for the transformation tool is the end of this year. It's December 31st, 2021. So please try and get us the data, GPS on benchmarks data, before the end of this year. There is a chance that we will be able to use data that's submitted after that, because as you know, things have been a bit delayed in terms of the rollout of the modernized system. So all I can say is that we can guarantee that data that you submit before December 31st, 2021 will be considered for use in the, will be evaluated and considered for use in the transformation tool. Any data after that, I can't guarantee. We certainly want to use the data that you submit, and we will try, but we're not going to be able to guarantee it just because of the complexity of how all the moving pieces in modernizing the system. So we're sticking to that the cutoff date of December 31st, with some unknown amount of time after that we could potentially accept the data. Get out there, find those marks near you, and submit. Fill out those mark recoveries and send them in. You can stay in the loop by subscribing to the NGS news and the GPS on benchmarks updates. I've been trying to send out regular GPS on benchmarks updates. I've been a little bit behind, but I'm trying to get back to it for June. And you can get ahead of the curve here with online lessons and videos and tutorials. Please check out our website. We've got lots of new great stuff out there to help you help us. And that's it. Folks, the future is already here, but it's just not evenly distributed yet. Please drop us a line. Let us know what you think if you have questions. And also this feedback. We have lots of new products that are coming out. If you check those out, and beta products or other products that you use, let me know what you think. If you have ideas, suggestions, concerns, ngs.feedback@noaa.gov comes to me, and I'll make the connection with the project teams that build those tools. So with that, I will be quiet and see if there are any questions for me.
Galen, this is Tony. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, I got two questions here. When do you expect engineers and designers to start using the new datums?
Well, I certainly hope they start using them as soon as they are released. Right now, we don't have an official release date. We did release a delay message earlier this year. And it really, things are kind of in flux right now, right? It really depends on the resources that Congress is able to give us over the next couple of years in terms of when we'll be able to finish the modernized system and release it. However, I will tell you that we have a socioeconomic benefits study that documents the benefits to society and for many different applications that will be derived from using the modernized system. And it's billions of dollars of benefits per year. And there are significant additional early adopter benefits to using the modernized system. So the sooner you can get on the new system, the sooner you're going to be realizing those real dollars and cents benefits that the modernized system will provide.
And a second question, I think you may have it answered on this slide, is a landing pad to access all of those dashboards. Is that the first one, GPS on Benchmarks page?
Yes, sir. So the GPS on Benchmarks page will get you to that, and that'll get you to the tool and to the dashboard. There's the link for the mark recovery. GEOID 18, I put a link on here in GEOID 18. I didn't talk too much about it, but if you look at the GEOID 18 technical report, there's a section in there about how we did the analysis of the GPS leveling and GEOID data to select which marks we use to constrain GEOID 18 in the Gulf Coast. And Dave Zulkowski contributed a lot to that section, and that's in there if you're interested in learning more about the marks that we used within in southern Louisiana.